Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show. I'm Dr. Ashley, and today I'm excited to share some time with a really amazing guest. Our guest today is Dr. Kelly Ann McCann. She is a board certified physician in internal medicine and pediatrics. She's trained in functional, integrative, and environmental medicine as well. She's known for her expertise in mold illness, chronic infections, mast cell activation syndrome, and complex chronic conditions. She integrates science, intuition, and spiritual psychology to help her clients, her patients, heal at the deepest level. Through her private practice called the Spring Center and her upcoming transformational programs, she guides clients from suffering to sovereignty, reclaiming their health, their power, and their purpose. She is an author of a forthcoming book that explores how illness is not the enemy, but actually a portal to healing the whole self. And that's just what we talk about today. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Kelly McCann.
Hey guys, quick interruption to the Dr. Ashley Show. After a decade of helping thousands shed pounds, I realized the need for an electrolyte mix tailored to support lean muscle mass and metabolic needs. People always talk about electrolytes for different sports or lifting weights, but what about for weight loss? It's a marathon of its own. Drumroll please, introducing Electrolyte Plus, your marathon champion. Packed with patented ingredients for optimal absorption, it fuels metabolism, supports adrenals, and stabilizes blood sugar. Say goodbye to those headaches and lightheadedness. Visit drashleywellness.com and use code Ashley10 for 10% off your first purchase, or 20% off your first subscription order with free shipping. Plus, enjoy a 30-day money-back guarantee. Back to the show.
Dr. Kelly, welcome to the show. I have been so excited and looking forward to having you on. I was just sharing with you that this community is really interested in optimizing their health and wellness. You specialize in complex chronic illnesses, and I have personally experienced a lot of odd symptoms. So I am looking forward to this personally as well. So thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to just dive in and talk about what you have found are some of the most common hidden health issues you see in your patients who are struggling with these complex chronic diseases.
Many patients these days have mast cell activation, so we can talk about that. But some of the root causes of these complex chronic illnesses include things like mold and mycotoxin illness, chronic infections like Lyme disease, Bartonella, Babesia. We call them tick-borne illnesses, although you can get Bartonella from cats, scratches, bites, and all different sorts of insects. Same thing with Babesia. There's a variety of different vectors, insects, mosquitoes that can transmit some of these infections. And so, maybe many people think, oh, well, I live in the desert or I live in California. I can't possibly be exposed to these things. And I don't know anybody who's never had a mosquito bite. Do you? No. So we're all at risk. And then, of course, the big elephant in the room, I think, on the planet these days is the environmental chemical exposures that we're all bathing in every day. No matter how hard we try to make healthy choices for ourselves, it's very difficult to avoid things like plastics and all the different obesogens, phthalates and parabens, bisphenols, etc., that are in our environment. So we can definitely talk about those things too.
Let's start with mold exposure. I think in all my reading, it's one of your specialties. Could you share with us how toxicity shows up in the body, why it's often misdiagnosed? Just take us down the mold pathway.
Yeah, mold is very confusing and it's challenging because as a medical doctor and, coming from a conventional standpoint, mold caused allergy, asthma, and then some people who are very unfortunate or very immune suppressed could get colonized with things like aspergillus and get, weird, unusual symptoms and be very sick. But for the most part, conventional medicine doesn't think that mold causes illness. In my functional medicine practice, I've learned otherwise. And mold can show up in people in a myriad of ways. There are probably 50 different potential symptoms. And usually in a family, you're going to get different presentations in each person. So some people might get more fatigue, brain fog, neurological symptoms, numbness, tingling, ice pick pains. I see a lot of people with psychiatric illness, anxiety, terrible depression, like out of the realm of anything they've ever experienced before, kinds of mood disorders. Some people get dysautonomias or POTS, so their autonomic nervous system doesn't work properly. They might have palpitations, or POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome. So I have a lot of young women in particular in my practice who have heart rates when they stand up of 120, 140, and they feel terrible. They're nauseated. They don't want to eat anything. People can have sleep disorders. That was one of my primary presentations. Was I had kind of depression, fatigue, and I couldn't sleep. That was my presentation. Some people will get joint pain, muscle pain. You can get a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms because oftentimes you're getting, you're swallowing some of the mold and the mycotoxins, and yeast is a kissing cousin of mold. And so I'll see people with yeast overgrowth or yeast in their GI tracts. SIBO, actually, one of the common causes I find of SIBO is mold exposure. And then they'll have SIFO too, so small intestinal fungal overgrowth. Let's see. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You kind of get the point, right? That a lot of different presentations. And of course, allergy, asthma, eczema, food sensitivities. And as I mentioned, it often triggers mast cell activation syndrome.
So then let's go into mast cell activation syndrome. How does that impact someone's weight? How does it impact energy? What is it exactly?
Sure. So mast cells, M-A-S-T, cells are born in the bone marrow. They're part of our immune system, and they're part of our like front guard. They are the parts of our immune system that live at the areas of interface. So they live in our respiratory tract, our GI tract. They live on the skin, and they love to hang out around the nerves and the blood vessels. And their job is to look for and identify what they perceive to be foreign invaders. So things like viruses, bacteria, molds and yeast, environmental chemicals. And what they do when they perceive a threat or a foreign invader is that they're filled with all these chemical messengers called mediators, and they release the mediators into the general environment where they perceive that threat. And those mediators then are inflammatory in nature most of the time. Things like histamine, prostaglandins, leukotrienes, cytokines, and chemokines. And they're sending out signals to the rest of the immune system like, hey, we have a problem here. Calling the rest of the immune system there to come deal with that threat. And what happens in some genetically susceptible people is that the mast cells get turned on and then they don't really turn off. And they get triggered by things that aren't necessarily a threat, like a food that you're eating, the smell of a flower, different kinds of scents. All sorts of things can become triggers for mast cells. Light, temperature, sound, you name it, stress. And then the mast cells tend to have lots of receptors. And so things like hormones can trigger mast cell activation. We have a lot of women who will have menstrual issues or endometriosis. They'll have terrible periods, painful periods, things like that, because the mast cells are getting triggered by the fluctuations of the hormones. And in terms of presentation, a lot of the symptoms that I described for mold, we could also apply to mast cell activation because there's a ton of overlap. Is it mold? Is it mast cell? It's the mast cell think about it more as a hypersensitivity reaction. So if people have multiple symptoms in multiple systems of the body that are allergic or inflammatory in nature, chances are there's some mast cell activation. And hormonally, when we're talking about weight gain and weight loss, one of the bigger complaints that I will hear with patients with mast cell is, well, they can't exercise because exercise will flare them. So they have an exercise intolerance, and that can also be seen in mold and Lyme as well, which is problematic for weight loss. But then the whole body and most of the cells end up in the cell danger response. So they are in a conservation kind of state, which we would normally attribute to like a what would be called like a stress response or even a sickness response, right? And when we're sick, our metabolism slows down tremendously because the body wants to conserve so that it can fight whatever it perceives the threat is. And so metabolically, they're in a depressed state and can't really function the way that we're supposed to lose weight. So a lot of people with mast cell will say, well, I only eat 5 foods and I don't eat very much, but I can't lose any weight. And that's partly because the body is perceiving it's under siege and it's really like, battling down the castle to protect everything.
So, how do you tell what the root cause is? Because I've gone down this myself and it seems a little bit of a rabbit hole because various practitioners rely on different testing. I'll show one test to one practitioner and they'll be like, that's the wrong test that you took. Or this test shows you that you're excreting mold through urine and that's what you want to be doing. Whereas another one's like, this means that you've got mold. How do you tell what the root is? Is it Lyme? Is it mold? Is it mast cell? If someone's just confused and has gone through a lot of this already or hasn't yet, but thinks something like this is impacting them, what would be your suggestion as like the first 3 steps to take? And to know that they're with a good practitioner who's actually going to get them results.
I think about things really simply. We have to get people's symptoms under better control, right? That's why they're here in our office, is because they don't feel well and they want to feel better. So we have to address that first. The other thing that we do have to do simultaneously is explore what the different possibilities are. And honestly, I use my intuition a lot in practicing medicine and good history taking skills, right? So you have to use your intuition as a practitioner. You have to use good history taking skills in order to figure out what it is and know that it's probably multifactorial. It is not going to be one thing, because as the bucket of the person fills, we talk about this in environmental medicine, the more environmental toxins you have, the more infections you have, the harder it is to handle those things, that it all becomes this, soup. And we have to slowly improve the capacity for detoxification, calm down the nervous system, calm down the immune system, and then start to treat the things that show up. And yeah, identifying that mold is an issue is tricky because they're not ideal tests. I find that shoemakers tests are not helpful at all.
And that's like
And
the gold standard when it comes to
depends on who you talk to, but
yeah.
I don't find them helpful at all. I don't bother because they're not specific. They're not specific at all. And I'm sure that there are plenty of people out there like, my shoemaker doctor got me better. I'm like, great, that's fantastic. The truth is there is no one right protocol for everyone, right? And so the quicker we move away from cookie cutter recipe medicine, the better. I'm sure that I'm sure that if you had one way that you did things for your mold patients and one way that you did things for your Lyme patients, you're going to get certain percentages of people better.
Yeah.
But you gotta, I mean, as a practitioner, I have as many tools as I can possibly have in my toolkit, and I
Mm-hmm.
bring them all out for people and try and, use my intuition to figure out which one is going to be the best one for that
Mm-hmm.
particular person at this moment in time when I'm seeing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely tricky.
It is. It's an art. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of testing, there are some companies' tests that I think are more reliable than others. There are some that I avoid like the plague and wish that I could, shout from the rooftops to other practitioners like, this is a worthless test. Please stop spending your patients' money on this test. It's not
Mm-hmm.
going to be of value. But, I don't want to slander any particular companies at the same time either. So I will tell you what I use, and recognize that there are caveats in those too, right? So I use urinary mycotoxin tests. The two companies that I think are valuable are Real Time Lab and Mosaic. I personally use Real Time Lab predominantly because I find that they are able, the level of sensitivity is there, so I can see more of what's in there, or I should say, more of what's being excreted. Recognizing that it's an excretion test. And so the sicker the people are when they're walking through my door, when I'm doing these baseline tests, I don't expect to see very much. And then in a repeat test in 6 months, when they're feeling better and their mast cells are stable and they're, able to get rid of some of these mycotoxins and then it lights up, great, then we know we're on the right track. And in California, there's mold everywhere. They don't know how to build anything here. So, I've lived in 12 houses in Orange County in the past 18 years, and every single one of them has been moldy. So I have a very, very high index of suspicion for mold in my California-based patients.
How do you test your homes for mold? How did you know that they're all moldy?
Um, a variety of different ways. I've used a number of indoor environmental professionals over the years. And I have one who I trust implicitly now. She's checked
Mm-hmm.
multiple houses that I've lived in the past 3 or 4 years, and it's been incredibly helpful. But for patients who are listening or people who are listening, they're like, "Oh, I can't afford the $6,000 or $4,000 or whatever it is to have an indoor environmental professional come in." There are do it yourself options that are reasonable. Immunolytics using mold plates is an expensive way to start. ERMI testing,
Mm-hmm.
I use LIS Biotech, LISBIOTECH.com for my ERMI testing. That's the one that my IEP uses. And then, yeah, even just getting a moisture meter from Home Depot for like $65. My husband and I rent right now. And so when we were looking for a rental space, the first thing we would do is look at the shrubs and the plantings around the house. And if there were too many plantings around the house, we knew that there would be a sprinkler system hitting the house and there was too much moisture.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wouldn't even bother to go drive by the place because there were too many things that were potentially problematic. And then when we did go look at something, we would take our moisture meter and go around the outside of the house, even before seeing if we wanted to go inside. And you take your moisture meter inside and you check,
Mm-hmm.
under the sink, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, around the shower. Yeah, I remember we looked at one rental place and they had wood floors in the bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a shower, and the wood floor right in front of the shower door was just rotten. You know, no, thank you. We can't even
Mm-hmm.
consider this place.
My home that I live in right now, the shower was like growing mushrooms, actually.
Oh dear.
Yeah, we've got that taken out, but I still wonder, how deep does that stuff go? So, have you ever had to remediate? before? And if so, what would you advise if you've gone through that process?
Yeah, I've been in a couple of rentals where we have gotten their landlord to remediate,
Mm-hmm.
which is a trick in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
But depending upon how sick you are, ideally you don't want to be in the house when they're remediating, even
Yeah.
though it's under containment. You want to make sure that your remediator is working with your IEP, your indoor environmental professional, who understands the difference between mold affecting somebody in a health situation. So there are lots of mold inspectors out there who are like, oh, it doesn't matter. They just do air sampling and they're not going to be helpful, right? I think air sampling has to be combined with a variety of other forms of testing, like cavity sampling and using an ERMI or some sort of qPCR, et cetera. There's a variety of different tests to really investigate what's happening with the house, depending upon how sick people are. So ideally don't live where they're being remediation, where they're remediating. I saw a patient yesterday who was living in her currently under remediation house, and she looked she looked terrible. She lost 15 pounds,
Wow.
and she felt awful. And and I had been telling her for years, I think there's mold in your house. I think there's mold in your house. I think there's mold in their house. And she had breast cancer and lung cancer and an
Mm-hmm.
autoimmune condition. And and eventually they found the mold, and then they found more mold.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her, you gotta leave. You gotta leave that house. You cannot be living there right
Mm-hmm.
now. So anyway, so depending upon how sick you are, please try and live somewhere else. And then do post remediation testing. You want to make sure that they got it all. Because if they didn't, then you're just back to where you started.
Mm-hmm.
There's secret mold. It can be under the beautiful vinyl flooring. You get brand new floors. If there's not a space between the slab and your flooring, then there can be moisture retained and mold growth. So it's really, really important to have that post remediation testing.
Mm-hmm. What about environmental toxins? We talked just very briefly about the impact, but what would you say are the most common ones that people should be aware of? Where are they hidden? And then what do we do about it?
Yeah, big questions, Ashley. Here we go. Okay. Um, plastics are huge. And I mean, most people recognize that there's plastic everywhere. We drink out of plastic water bottles. Much of our food comes in plastic. All of our personal care products come in plastic. And, you know, plastics are combined with other toxicants. They're, there's the material itself, and then there's the different chemicals in them, such as phthalates, which make plastic soft, and bisphenols, which make plastic hard.
Mm-hmm.
So you like your hard Nalgene bottles. That's a bisphenol. Now, if something says it's BPA free, that means that it's a different bisphenol, like bisphenol F or bisphenol S, which are what we like to term in environmental medicine regrettable substitutions,
Mm-hmm.
meaning
Not better.
not better, just as bad, if not
Mm-hmm.
worse.
Mm-hmm.
So, best thing to do, throw out your plastic water bottles, throw out your, plastic Tupperware containers, get real glass. Never heat your microwave in plastic, or never heat your food in plastic in a microwave.
Even if it says it's microwavable safe, like, right, the things that you get, the bags that you get
Oh
from
my
the grocery
gosh,
store to cook your veggies in, we shouldn't be
that
cooking in those, right?
kills me. That kills me. Open the bag. Do not cook it in a
Mm-hmm.
bag. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's microwavable, but that doesn't mean it's plastic free. So
Mm-hmm.
you heat that stuff up, all the plastic, the microplastics, nanoplastics, phthalates are in your food now. Yeah, not good. And it's very difficult to get out. We eat, the recent research estimates that we eat about a credit card size of plastic a week.
That's right.
Yeah, so terrible. So that's a huge one. And there are obesogens. These are obesogens.
Can you explain what that means?
Yes, these have endocrine disrupting effects that lead to weight gain or will interfere with weight loss. Even though they are not considered persistent, like plastics, phthalates, and bisphenols are not persistent organic pollutants, but they're ubiquitous. So the more that we're able to avoid them, the better we are. Unlike things like flame retardants and other classes of chemicals, such as forever chemicals. So these would be your perfluorinates like PFAS,
Mm-hmm.
PFOS. Those are persistent. And at this moment in time, the only way to get them out of the body is plasmapheresis.
Hmm.
So we cannot get these perfluorinates out of the body. We can't do sauna. We can't cold plunge. We can't take a supplement, do a liver cleanse to get them out.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that those forever chemicals are in like the foil wrappers that you get your butter in. Like I love Kerrygold butter, and you can get Kerrygold butter in multiple ways, but one of the most common that I see in the grocery store, even in Whole Foods, is wrapped in that foil. And then the fats absorb those chemicals, and then we consume them and can't get rid of them. Where else are those forever chemicals found?
They're actually in the water.
Oh, great.
Yeah, they're in the water. 50% of the, I think Dr. Lynn Patrick was telling me the other day, I think it's about 50%, maybe even higher, is in the
Hmm.
water sources, in our public water sources. So we absolutely have to be filtering our water. And a Brita is not going to cut it. We need either reverse osmosis or something like a zero water filter to get out those forever chemicals.
Do you have any brands of filters that you like?
Yeah, so I mentioned zero water.
Hmm.
So zero water filters are very complex. They're ginormous filters. They did have a glass container. Now there's still some plastic in it, but you have to have some of your trade-offs. I'll take a little plastic over some PFASs any day. And but recently I looked on their website and I didn't see their glass container anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge bummer. I might have to write the company and
Mm-hmm.
complain. Purify water. Let me see. Purifex. Sorry, Purifex. It's actually on my website. Was designed by a NASA scientist, and it's a great system. That was I learned about that from Dr. Lynn Patrick also.
We use Aquasana, which I think is pretty decent, but it's a whole house filter.
Yeah, I mean, I think many filters out there are going to be better than nothing, right?
Hmm.
And the one of the cool things that I like about zero water is they have a little wand where they're looking at the amount of um, solids in the water, and so you can measure your water, how much stuff is in it. It's
It's
not.
interesting to see,
It's
isn't it?
it's interesting to see.
Hmm.
So um, I was living in Laguna Niguel in like South County, Orange County. The water there, unfortunately, would typically score with that little meter like 500, and we were going through the filters every 2 weeks. So most people are like,
Wow.
I'm going to change my filter, once a year, once every 6 months.
Yeah.
2 weeks, and you could tell because the water would start to taste terrible when the filter would
Mm.
get filled with all the crap in it. In Costa Mesa, the water is a little bit better here. It typically grades around a 200. And then, yeah, we have like a
What's the
filter
goal rating?
zero. That's why they
Okay,
call it zero water, right?
that would make sense.
So, so we have a filter at home on our, like our kitchen filter and sink filter, and it scores about a 50. And then the
Okay.
zero water is a zero. And I
Mhm.
think, Mountain Valley spring water is like 25. So there's something in
I
it, and
do
it
love
could be
that
mineral.
water.
I love it. Mountain Valley spring water, for the win every time.
It does. It makes
Um,
me feel so great. You guys listening or watching, it's the water that is in the green glass bottle. And there's
yes.
just something about it that's pretty delicious. And when I go to high altitude, I usually
Mhm.
get a headache. And if I drink that water, I don't. So
Yes.
it
Yes.
is not,
Or
it tastes
you
good
go
too.
to the desert. Like when I go to Arizona, it is so
Mhm.
dry, but if I have Mountain
Yeah.
Valley spring water, I'll go buy a case when I'm
Hmm.
going for.
Same.
Yeah, so I'll see you and we'll
Yeah,
go
we'll
buy a
probably be
case.
drinking out of our green bottles. We can start fearing everything our homes with the mold, the mosquito bites, the city water. I mean, what are the actionable steps, like the top five, that we can take just to feel good that we're taking positive action? It sounds like drinking filtered water, not cooking or using plastics whenever possible. What else would be there?
So the other big place of contamination is dust.
Mm.
Dust in the homes. Um, and I'm guilty of this too. It's like, what are my clothes made out of? Well,
Hmm.
okay, so I've got some yoga clothes that are definitely made with plastic. Yes,
Yeah.
I've invested in a couple. There are some really cool companies out there that are making non, non
Will you
polyester, non.
share what your favorite brands are?
Um, let's see. There's one called Paca. I think they make like
Yeah,
organic underwear.
they're the best out of like
PAKA.
alpaca, right? I actually have
Yes.
them up in a tab right here because I love their socks and their sweaters, and they don't smell at all. Like, not if you don't have to wash them all the time. So I actually have that up. That's so funny, but I agree with you on that.
Yeah. There's one called uh, Active. I don't know. It's got a couple of umlauts over over
Hmm.
it. They are like plant-based workout
Hmm.
clothes. They're super soft. I really like them a lot. I think there's another company too that I see on
Hmm.
Instagram. I don't remember the name right now, but those are pretty
Packed,
cool.
I think, is a good
Oh,
one.
Pact, yes,
Mhm.
PACT.
Mhm.
Um, Mate the Label also has some good
Mhm.
organic cotton clothes, women's
Yeah.
clothing. So they're more and more out there. But
Yeah.
suffice it to say, while you're transitioning your closet, I'm transitioning mine. You know, um, when we wash our clothes, part the particles break down and they end up in the water, right? So that's part of the reason why there's stuff in the water. And then when we throw it in the dryer, it breaks down in the dryer, and now we've got dust.
Mhm.
Not only that, everything that we're walking into the home with, in terms of our shoes, if we walked through, you know, a place where somebody sprayed glyphosate or Roundup, we're bringing pesticides in, and then just the ambient air, there's pollution and things coming into our air, and then settling in dust. All the plastic things like our computers and our TVs, our stereo systems, those are all plastic and they're breaking down over time and ending up in our plastic toys. It's ending up in the dust. So, what we really need to be doing is dusting and vacuuming on a regular
Mhm.
basis and of not wearing shoes in the house.
Mhm. I've heard that before, actually.
Yeah, that one's
Mhm.
super important. And get some slippers, and everybody gets to wear slippers. And I just imagine life with a dog. I don't have a dog right now, but um, yeah, wiping off their feet. I remember I was having a conversation with Dr. Jill Carnahan about her glyphosate levels, and she was shocked because they were so high. And you know, she's eating pristine. She's a well-known functional medicine doctor, eats only organic, but she had dogs and they would hop into bed with her.
Mm. Hmm.
And there was glyphosate that people had sprayed in the neighborhood on their lawns in the form of Roundup, and it was getting on the little
Mhm.
dog's feet and getting in her bed.
Interesting.
Yeah, so wipe off your dog's feet when they come back in the
Oh my
house.
God, I can't even imagine. Between 3 kids and 3 dogs, I don't know if I could keep up with it.
Yeah, I
A
don't
lot.
know. But then maybe it's where you become involved as an activist in your community and see if you
Mhm.
can, uh, like the city of Irvine doesn't spray pesticides,
Hmm.
because the residents decided that that's what they wanted to do. That's
Yeah.
fantastic, right? So there are possibilities where we can change the way that things exist in the world, in our own homes, in our own communities, when we
Mhm.
have the passion and the education to do so.
Why do you think that some people are more susceptible than others when it comes to weight changes from these exposures that we've talked about? Is it all genetics?
No, I think it's multifactorial. You know, it's really impossible to say it's just one thing. But certainly these environmental contaminants make a difference, especially the persistent organic pollutants. The way that I think about it when I learned this from Dr. Walter Krinian was, we have our fat cells, and it is safer for the toxins, for it's safer for our bodies and our organs to have the toxins hanging out in the fat cells. So if we have toxic fat because we've gotten a lot of exposures from persistent organic pollutants, because of where we grew up, because of our mom's history before we were born, because of our diet, lifestyle, etc., exposures, um, we can have environmental chemicals safely stored in the fat cells.
Hmm.
When we lose weight, those fat cells shrink, and then the toxins have to go somewhere. So now they're
Hmm.
in the bloodstream, they're impacting the organs, and and I think that this is one of the reasons why when people stop a weight loss program or they stop a weight loss drug and they have that rebound effect and they
Hmm.
gain that weight back, it's
Hmm.
because they didn't know to do the detoxification and get rid of all the circulating toxicants. And
Hmm.
so now those toxins are going back into the fat cells
Hmm.
and being
Okay.
stored
Yeah,
there.
that's a good point. So then what are some steps that folks can take to detox as they are going through their weight loss journey? Would this be sauna, taking a
Hmm.
binder, rebounding, dry brushing,
Yes,
anything else there that I've missed?
sure, all those things. And, really alkalinizing the body. So if they're able to tolerate different kinds of green leafy vegetables, chlorella, cilantro, chlorophyll, those all help the excretion of the persistent organic pollutants. Drinking lemon and alkalinizing the body that way. So carbonated mineral waters in glass, of course, um, also help alkalinize the system. And those are really simple things that you can do,
Mhm.
depending upon the level of exposure, um, or if somebody also has diabetes. Um, my suggestion would be you may really want to consider doing something like coffee enemas or colonics.
Mhm.
And here's why: the fat toxins, the persistent organic pollutants that we're talking about, PCBs, pesticides, flame retardants, they have an affinity for our fat. And so what happens is they are hanging out in the liver and the gallbladder if they're not in the fat cells, right? So we eat a fatty meal, the the bile gets dumped into the gastrointestinal tract to help us digest that fat, and that's where all the toxins are.
Mhm.
And the reason that we take binders is we want to grab some of those environmental chemicals But what happens is the enterohepatic recirculation, which says, I just made this really expensive bile. It's expensive for the body to make. I'm going to pull that back into the body so that I can recycle it and reuse it again, and I don't have to make it from scratch. Well, we want to interrupt that enterohepatic recirculation because that bile is kind of toxic. We want to get rid of that. One of the best ways to do that is coffee enemas or colonics, because then you get bile dumps and you're able to overwhelm that enterohepatic recirculation, and more gets out than gets recycled.
Yeah, and it might sound daunting, coffee enemas, but they're actually pretty darn simple to do. And you can just get a stainless steel
Yeah.
contraption on Amazon and special coffee and just do it at home. So it doesn't have to be anything scary.
Or expensive. It's not
Mhm.
that expensive.
Mhm.
There's a couple coffee brands that I like.
Mhm.
S.A. Wilson coffee is very good for coffee enemas. Any sort of coffee will do, but the coffees that are intended for coffee enema use probably have more of the chemical components that are going to help with that bile dump.
Mhm. Yeah. I would love to end with you sharing a story of a patient where you guys address the environmental, the root cause. Like, how did you find it? And then was there a dramatic shift in their health as a result? Could you share a story around that?
Sure, I would love to. So I had a woman come in. Um, she had probably had POTS for close to 15 years. It took her about 10 years to get a diagnosis. So she was definitely suffering by the time she got a diagnosis. Um, her heart rate was typically, when she would stand, in the 120s, 140s. She couldn't stand for more than 3 minutes at a time, so she couldn't even stand in front of a microwave to heat up her food. She had chairs or stools or some place to rest all over her house. So she would, have like in the middle of the living room. She couldn't make it from the couch to the kitchen or the couch to the bathroom. Some days she would have to not drink or eat very much because she was so sick. She would need assistance to get to the bathroom. So she'd have to wait until somebody could come and help her to the bathroom. That's how significant it was. It took her 2 weeks to fill out her intake form with me. Now, granted, it's like a 50-page intake form, and it's a pretty daunting thing. But then it took her close to a month to recover after filling it out because she was so emotionally and physically exhausted from filling it out. When she got here, she wasn't able to sit upright. About 15, 20 minutes in, she started to look a little gray, and I could see her eyes glazing over. And I said, "Do you need to lie down?" And so luckily I have a love seat. So she was able to lie down for the remainder of the intake, first appointment that we had. And, this woman went to Mayo. She got her diagnosis of POTS at Mayo Clinic,
Mhm.
along with a diagnosis of mast cell activation syndrome. And she had that for 5 years before she saw me. She saw several other very prominent functional medicine practitioners. Nobody gave her any medications. Nobody gave her any supplements. Nobody gave her anything to do. She just got the diagnosis.
Mhm.
So, sadly, that was the case. I didn't understand it, but and I found a whole bunch of gems in her labs. She had hyperparathyroidism, she had Lyme disease, she was in a moldy house, um, and yeah, she clearly had mast cell activation and POTS. And so got her on an appropriate medication regimen, got her heart rate into a much more normal range. And, she had been thinner earlier on in her life, but at this point she was pretty heavy. Um, and, that wasn't what we were going to tackle first, of course. We needed to get her to feel better. And so worked really on the mast cell activation and getting her POTS under control, and starting to treat the Lyme. So we did tinctures, and I don't even think we did we didn't even do antibiotics. We just did tinctures and herbs and mold protocols with phosphatidylcholine and some binders, and and we worked on the psychological piece too, because she had a lot of attachments about things. And I think this is an issue that that a lot of people struggle with. It's like, I have this, I am this, I am a cancer survivor. It becomes the identity, and as long as that's your identity, it's really hard to get better, because you have to let go of that identity, right? So when people start to say, I've been diagnosed with this, there's that separation. So she was able to make that transition, like, this is a separation. It's not who I am. And she was really gaining traction. And her husband, this was during COVID, so this was a really challenging time. He's a police officer, and his worldview was very different from her worldview, and how we were starting to explore spirituality and meaning and purpose, and he's seeing the world as this terrible negative place, and riots, and so the dichotomy just became so great. She came in to my office one day, and she just broke down in tears, because he said, I want a divorce. And I think that was a really pivotal moment for her, because she said, he's been with me for 15 years, and now I'm finally getting better. And I don't understand. He's been my rock. He's been the only one who's been consistent for me. And I said, you know what? That's actually not true. You've been the one. You are the one who's been most consistently there for you. You've always been there for you. You've always had that spark that you're going to find help, that you're going to get better. And she started to cry, and it had this huge shift. Like, even when she thought her body was betraying her, it really wasn't. It kept her going, and her spirit kept her going. And these days, I saw her probably a couple months ago. She was able to move out of her house with her ex-husband into a new apartment. Moving is very stressful and very hard on the body. She had her friends and her family help her, but basically she moved herself, full weekend, 15-hour days, moving herself. This was a woman who couldn't go to the bathroom by herself, right? She works full time. She goes to the gym after every day, walks on the treadmill, and then we started doing some peptides for weight loss. She's lost 40 pounds. She is so happy and so full of life, and so much more than she ever anticipated being, in terms of healing and growing, and just on her journey.
Big transformation.
Yes.
I appreciate you sharing that story. Dr. Kelly, where can people learn more and follow you?
My brick and mortar practice is in Southern California and Costa Mesa, as I mentioned. I have medical licenses in about 12 different states, so I do see patients from all over the country. And we do ask that patients come see us here first in California, and then we can do telehealth for much of the year. And so people can find me there if they're interested. I also have a personal website, dr.kellymccann.com. That's dr.kellymccann.com, where I have blogs and webinar series if you want to learn more there. And you can follow me on social media at Dr. Kelly McCann.
Thank you so much. I have learned a lot, and I really appreciate all of your expertise and insights and the time that you spent with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley.
Thanks, you guys, so much for listening to this episode. I hope that you got some great takeaways. to reduce the environmental toxin load. If you are experiencing odd signs and symptoms, maybe some ideas of looking into mold or Lyme, or again, these environmental toxins that can contribute to mast cell activation syndrome. Lots of interesting things for sure. Now, if you are listening to this on a podcast platform, please leave a review. It really means a lot to me, and it helps us to influence more people in a positive way. If you are watching this on YouTube, if you have any thoughts or comments or questions, please drop them in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss another video. And as always, remember, you guys, you have to step up to make the change. Lead with your heart, train your mind, and do not negotiate with your body. I'll see you next time.